What if I told you that 9 children's hearts all stopped beating at exactly the same moment, but they died 100 years apart? In 1966, a construction crew digging outside Kentucky made a discovery that would destroy their lives. 17 feet down, buried in a perfect circle, they found 9 small bodies. Each child had an identical birthmark carved into their left shoulder, a crescent moon holding 3 stars, and each one had died exactly 1 century after the last. The state buried the truth within 3 days, but some secrets refused to stay hidden. In 1723, a man calling himself appeared in what would become Harlan County, Kentucky. He bought 200 acres with money nobody could trace. People called him a doctor, though no one remembered where he'd trained. Frontier towns didn't ask many questions about men who could heal wounds and mix medicine from plants. But hadn't come to save lives, he'd come to cheat death itself. Within 7 years, married and fathered multiple children. Neighbors noticed strange things. His crops never failed while others starved. His animals never got sick, and never looked older than 40, even as his wife's face wrinkled and her hands twisted with age. His first wife, Constance, died in 1744 at just 38. The official record blamed sadness, but her sister wrote in a private letter that Constance tried escaping 3 times. Each time she packed her bags, one of her children collapsed with mysterious illness. The 3rd time she made it to the property edge before her youngest daughter started convulsing. Constance unpacked. The child recovered. She never tried leaving again. Within 6 months, his second wife gave him 3 children before dying of the same mysterious sadness in 1751. He married again, and again. Each wife bore him children. Each wife died young. Through it all, didn't age, didn't weaken, didn't slow. By 1760, he'd fathered 19 children across 4 marriages. That's when the killing began. The first sacrifice was an infant named Mercy, born in winter 1766 to his 4th wife. The mother bled for 3 days after birth before dying. The baby lived exactly 6 weeks. Official records blamed fever, but no fever swept through the county that winter. No epidemic, no sickness. Just one infant wrapped in cloth, buried at midnight on land, far from where the wives rested. His oldest son Samuel was 26 when Mercy died. He kept a journal that wouldn't surface for almost 200 years. The entries were written in shaking handwriting. In March 1767, Samuel wrote, "Father has made a deal I cannot understand. He talks about time like it's a river he's learned to block. He says we're blessed, but I've seen what he buries under the old oak tree. I've seen the symbols he cuts into their skin before covering them with dirt. This isn't a blessing, this is a purchase." Samuel vanished in 1768. No death record exists. No grave was ever marked. His name simply disappeared from all family documents, as if someone carefully erased him. But his journal survived, hidden in a secret compartment of a trunk that passed through 6 generations before anyone looked inside. What Samuel witnessed was just the beginning of a pattern that would repeat with mechanical precision for the next 100 years. Every century, a child died in infancy or early childhood. Every century, the family buried that child in secret. And every century, the surviving continued thriving in impossible ways. They gathered land, money, power. Men who should have been dead from old age kept walking with youthful energy. Women who should have been unable to have children bore babies into their 50s. The bloodline didn't weaken, it grew stronger. And the cost was paid in small, cold bodies of children who never celebrated their first birthday. By 1866, the family had built an empire. They owned coal mines, fabric mills, and logging companies across 3 states. They married into political families, banking families, railroad families. The name appeared on property deeds and college diplomas, on court documents and church records. They'd become untouchable. That year, another child died, a 9-month-old boy named Thomas. Cause of death, unknown, buried at night alone. The pattern should continued. Another century, another child, another silent grave under Kentucky soil. But something broke in 1966. Or perhaps something finally went right, depending on how you measure the price of ending a curse that was never meant to end. The highway crew that found the bodies was led by Dale, a Korean War veteran who'd seen enough death to recognize when something was deeply wrong. He noticed the birthmarks first, before any official arrived. He saw that the children had been arranged in a specific circle, their heads pointing toward a center spot where the soil looked darker, richer, as if something had been feeding there for generations. And he called the state police instead of the local sheriff. That decision probably saved his life. The local sheriff was Vernon Cobb. His grandmother was a. He arrived within an hour of the discovery before state police carrying instructions. Clear the site immediately. Move the bodies to the county building. Take no photographs. Tell no reporters. Dale refused. He'd already called the state capitol. Investigators were already coming. Sheriff Cobb stood at the edge of that pit for 20 minutes, staring down at the circle of bones. Then he walked back to his police car and drove away. He quit 3 days later and moved to Florida. He died of a heart attack in 1971. He was 42 years old. The medical examiner who studied the remains was Dr. Philip Marsh, a man with 30 years of experience and a reputation for extreme thoroughness. He spent 6 days with those bodies. He documented every bone, every tooth, every scrap of fabric. What he found should have been impossible. The remains had been buried at different times. That was clear from the layers of soil and how decomposed they were. But the cause of death was identical in every case. Each child died from sudden heart failure. No disease, no injuries, no poison he could detect. Their hearts simply stopped at once, as if someone reached into their chests and flipped a switch. Dr. Marsh wrote a 73-page report. He submitted it on November 18, 1966. The report was classified within 2 days. Dr. Marsh was called to a meeting in Louisville. He returned to his office, packed his files, and resigned immediately. He never practiced medicine again. In a letter to his daughter written 20 years later and found after his death, he wrote only this: "There are families in this country who made deals that are older than the Constitution. I was shown proof. I was shown names. I was told that some doors once opened can never be closed. I chose to walk away. I suggest you do the same if you ever hear the name." The family in 1966 consisted of 47 living members spread across Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. They'd evolved with the times. No longer frontier doctors and land buyers, they were now lawyers, state politicians, university leaders, and hospital directors. They owned radio stations and insurance companies. They funded scholarships and history organizations. They appeared in every way to be pillars of their communities, respected, admired beyond suspicion. But the discovery of those 9 bodies threatened to unravel 2.5 centuries of carefully guarded silence. So the family did what families like theirs have always done when their secrets claw to the surface. They applied pressure. They called in favors. They reminded certain people of certain obligations inherited along with property titles and trust funds. Within 3 weeks of the discovery, the highway project was rerouted. The dig site was filled and paved over, becoming part of a rest stop parking lot that still exists today, 20 miles outside on Interstate 75. The 9 sets of remains were cremated by order of the state health department, listed as a public health precaution due to unidentified soil contamination. The cremation was performed by a funeral home in Lexington owned by a man whose grandmother was a. The ashes were never claimed. They were scattered in an unmarked place that no record identifies. Dale received a settlement from the State Highway Department in January 1967. The amount was never revealed, but bought a 200-acre farm in Indiana and retired at 41. He gave one interview to a local newspaper in 1983, 16 years after the incident. When asked about what he found that day in '66, he said only this: "I dug up something that should stayed buried, not the children. They deserved better. I mean the truth. Some families in this country have been around so long they've become part of the ground itself. You can't pull them up without pulling up everything around them. I took money to forget, but I never forgot. I see those little skulls every time I close my eyes, and I see the marks on their shoulders. Someone carved those marks into them after they died. Someone wanted them branded for whatever comes next." The reporter who did that interview tried to dig deeper into the story. His editor killed the piece. The reporter quit 3 months later and moved to Oregon. The newspaper went bankrupt in 1987. The building was purchased by a development company. The company's largest investor was a trust controlled by the family foundation. The question that haunted Dr. Marsh, that drove Dale to take money and disappear, that made a sheriff abandon his career and flee to another state, wasn't simply what happened to those children. It was why. What kind of deal requires a child's death every 100 years? What kind of power is worth that price? And perhaps most disturbing, who or what was collecting? The answer exists in documents never meant to survive. In 1841, a clerk named Tobias Wren worked in the Harlan County Courthouse. He landed deeds and birth records into official books. Tobias was also careful and curious, interested in family trees and local history. He kept private notebooks where he tracked family lines, recorded odd patterns, noted differences between official records and town gossip. These notebooks were discovered in 1998 in the basement of a demolished building. They'd been sealed in a metal box and hidden behind a false wall. In one entry from October 1842, Tobias writes about a conversation he overheard between two elderly women at the general store. One described a memory from her childhood in the late 1700s. She spoke of a traveling preacher who came through the county, a man who claimed he could read the future in a person's bloodline. He stopped at the property and stayed 3 days. When he left, he carried a leather bag the woman swore hadn't been with him when he arrived. She remembered because her father, who worked for helped load the preacher's wagon. Her father told her the bag was heavy, far heavier than leather and paper should be, and it made a sound when it shifted, not a rustle, a whisper. The preacher's name, according to Tobias Wren's notes, was, "No birth record exists for anyone by that name. No death record either. But the name appears in scattered references across multiple counties in Kentucky and Virginia between 1750 and 1820, always described as a preacher, always traveling, always stopping at homes of families who seemed to prosper after his visits, and always leaving with something he hadn't brought." If you're still watching, you're braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? In Samuel's journal, there's an entry from April 1767 describing a ritual his father performed on the night of the spring equinox. Samuel writes that gathered the entire family in a clearing on their property, a place where trees grew in a circle and nothing would grow inside that circle, not even grass. Stood at the center and spoke words Samuel didn't recognize, words that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. Then cut his own palm and let blood drip onto the barren ground. He said the land had been given a taste of their bloodline, and every 100 years it would hunger again. If they fed it, they would never know poverty, never know sickness, never know the weakness that brings all people low. After 1966, something fundamental changed within the family. The pattern that sustained them for 243 years had been interrupted. The 9 children had been dug up, cremated, scattered. The ritual site had been paved over. Whatever agreement made in 1766 no longer held the same power. And the family began rotting from within. The first sign came in 1968. A state representative and one of the family's most prominent members suffered a stroke at 52. He survived, but his left side remained paralyzed. His mind remained sharp enough to understand what was happening. He from public life. In 1970, his wife left him. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. But in a court statement sealed by order, she that had become obsessed with family history. He spent hours examining old documents, calculating dates, counting deaths. He'd filled an entire room with papers covered in frantic handwriting. He kept repeating the same thing. We owe 9 more. We owe 9 more. The account is not balanced. By 1975, 6 members of the family had died of various illnesses: cancer, heart disease, kidney failure. Natural causes by all medical standards. But for a family that experienced almost no natural deaths in over 2 centuries, it was catastrophic. The younger generation began fracturing. Some changed their names. Some moved to distant states and cut all contact. Some refused to have children, terrified of passing on whatever corruption ran through their blood. In 1982, a woman named published a book under a fake name. The book was titled The Price of Prosperity: Hidden Costs in American Family Dynasties. It was sold as historical fiction. It told the story of a fictional family called the Who made a bargain with something ancient living in the land itself, something older than European settlement, something with its own understanding of debt and payment. The book sold poorly and went out of print within 2 years. But those who read it carefully noticed that every date, every death, every detail matched the true history of the family, with only the names changed. Died in 1988. She was 53 years old. The death certificate listed pneumonia. But her neighbor, a retired nurse, later told investigators that wasted away over 6 months, losing weight and strength as if something was draining her from inside. The neighbor told her near the end that she'd broken a silence she should kept, that there were agreements older than law, and breaking them came with consequences that didn't care about good intentions. The family today exists in fragments. They still own property. They still hold positions of minor influence. But the dynasty that once seemed immortal has been reduced to something ordinary, something mortal. They age now. They sicken. They die. And every remaining member of that family knows exactly what they lost and exactly what they paid to have it in the first place. In 2003, a graduate student at the University of Kentucky named Jennifer was researching Appalachian folklore for her thesis. She'd obtained access to the archives of the Kentucky Historical Society, and in a box of miscellaneous documents from Harlan County, she found something that shouldn't have existed. It was a photocopy of a photocopy, degraded and barely readable, but unmistakable in its content. It was a page from Dr. Philip Marsh's original autopsy report from 1966, the page detailing the birthmarks found on each of the 9 children. Jennifer made copies and began investigating. She tracked down Dale's son in Indiana. She found a niece of Dr. Marsh in North Carolina. She even located the reporter who interviewed in 1983. She compiled everything into a draft thesis chapter titled The Phenomenon: Ritual Sacrifice and Family Legacy in Rural Kentucky. Her faculty advisor read the chapter and called her into his office. He told her the chapter couldn't be included. He told her certain families had legal resources beyond what a graduate student could afford to fight. He told her to choose another topic. Jennifer refused. She submitted the full thesis in May 2004. It was rejected by her committee, not for lack of scholarship, not for poor methods, but for what they called unsubstantiated allegations against living individuals. Jennifer appealed. The appeal was, she left the university without her degree. The last known record of her is a social media post from 2009, where she mentioned still researching the family and finding new evidence. She hasn't posted since. Multiple attempts to locate her have been unsuccessful. But the documents are still out there, circulating in small circles, passed between researchers and amateur historians who understand that some stories are actively suppressed, not because they're false, but because they're true. The rest stop on Interstate 75 still exists. Travelers stop there every day, unaware they're standing on ground where 9 children were buried in a circle, their hearts stopped by something that expected payment and received it for over 200 years. The family has never issued a public statement about the events of 1966. They've never acknowledged the buried children. They've never explained why their family thrived with such unnatural consistency for so long, or why that consistency ended so abruptly. They simply continue to exist, diminished and mortal, carrying a history they cannot speak and a debt they can never fully repay. In 2019, the rest stop was scheduled for renovation. During preliminary digging, workers reported finding fragments of what appeared to be very old bone buried far deeper than the parking lot foundation. The work stopped for 3 days. A state archaeologist was called in. He examined the site, filed a report, and declared the fragments to be animal remains of no historical significance. The renovation continued. The parking lot was expanded. The earth was sealed once more. Some agreements, it seems, don't end simply because the payments stop. They linger in the soil. They wait in the bloodlines. They persist in the silence of families who know exactly what their ancestors did and understand that speaking that truth aloud would cost more than any of them are willing to pay. The children are gone. Their bones are ash. Their names are forgotten. But the mark on their shoulders, that crescent moon cradling 3 stars, still appears in the nightmares of those who saw it. And in quiet moments, when wind moves through the Kentucky hills, there are those who swear they can still hear children whispering beneath the ground, asking when the debt will finally be paid in full. The answer, of course, is never. Some prices are paid across generations. Some bargains outlive the people who made them. And some families learn too late that immortality isn't a gift. It's a loan.